If you're enjoying the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This edition of our podcast is brought to you by 360 Health and Well Balanced Nutrition.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hey, all you lovely people. I've got a fun question for you. What is like a machine, but so much more mysterious and impressive, on all the time, goes decades without needing repairs, runs on water and food, and plus it's conscious?
Let me think about that. Could it be the body?
Yes!
Oh, woo! Well, us health geeks have gathered once again, and we're talking about a book called The Body, A Guide for Occupants by Bill Bryson.
Yes, so Eleanor has wanted to read this book for a long time, and I have shoved it off because it's a very thick book, but we have read it, and it is a fun one indeed.
So I was going to ask you about that because when Kristen and I were brainstorming, let's do a podcast, and then we said, yeah, let's do it. What are we going to read? I said, The Body by Bill Bryson. And she said, oh. And I said, oh. So anyway,
it's just a thick book, y'all.
But I hadn't read it at that time either. So, I had been to a book club, and a veterinary surgeon had suggested that we would read this at that book club. And it was this book that book club fell apart over. And so,
well, let's hope that doesn't happen here.
Yeah, I don't know. So I thought, well, you all know my background, maybe not, but I love anatomy and physiology and have spent a lot of my years inside the intricacies of such. So this subject matter is like right up my lane, and I love this stuff. So, Kristen, now that you've read it and you're not an anatomist or a physiologist, did you find it readable?
Yeah, I was going to say it's not really for your type. It's more for those who are curious, but not at the level they want to be a scientist, but they just want to know more about how our body works. And Bill Bryson does a really good job of telling that story in a very entertaining way, and also sharing the history of how we've gotten to know what we know about the body and some crazy stories along the way.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about him, because I think that'll color in what it is. I love to talk about book structure. Since I'm an anatomist, I have to look at structure. Bill Bryson's best-selling books include A Walk in the Woods, which I have read, and if you have not read it, it is so great. It's about a story of two guys walking the Appalachian Trail. It's hysterical. You'll love it. Life of Times of a Thunderbolt Kid, A Short History of Nearly Everything, which won the Aventus Prize in Britain and the Descartes Prize in European Union's highest literary award. So this fella has got an interesting background, being an American citizen, but having spent a lot of his adult life in England and Europe.
He actually has dual citizenship now.
Oh, does he? Because I was reading that he was not sure he wanted to take the test for the citizenship and was thinking he would, so he actually did it?
He did, yeah.
Okay, all right. He was Chancellor of Durham University, England's third oldest university, from 2005 to 2011, which I think sounds pretty impressive. So I said, I know what a chancellor at Wake Forest University does. I wonder what a chancellor at Durham University does, because we're talking different academic structures, the American structure and the British structure.
Right.
So it turns out a chancellor over at this particular university is sort of a celebrity and kind of, the face of the place, but maybe not the academic, because this guy never graduated from college.
Right. I was shocked when I saw that.
Yeah, so I thought, how did he get to be chancellor if he doesn't have any degrees from anything? But anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. And he's honorary fellow of Britain's Royal Society. So even without the college education, this man is extremely well educated and versed, accomplished, recognized. Yeah.
He did his book about his travels in Britain then turned into a TV show, and I think that gained him popularity over there.
Probably so, yeah. He's a very likable person. He has structured his book, though. I think it's kind of interesting what I was noticing. There's no introduction. Like, why did he write this book? And he really doesn't tell us that in here. There are some video interviews on the YouTube and other things that he does address that. But he just kind of, it's published by Doubleday, and Doubleday in 2019. So this is a pretty current book, one of his latest books. Doubleday's very well-established publishing house started in 1897. Some of the authors that they have published are Rudyard Kipling, Teddy Roosevelt, Joseph Conrad, an extensive list of remarkable American authors. And I don't think they publish people who don't present really good manuscripts. So they have a strong editorial board, and they're very good about what they do. So I think that speaks on behalf of this. And just an aside, did you know that Doubleday owned the New York Mets?
No.
Yeah.
I think I did know that.
Yeah, and they have, I think, recently sold them. But that for a long time, they were owners of the Major League Baseball team. I
know that the Chicago Tribune was the owner of the Cubs for a while.
Really?
Yeah.
What's
they're
that?
They're not anymore. But
I wonder what that's about. Mm-hmm. A publishing house is owning sports, and the nerds owning those athletes. I don't know.
Maybe that's part of it.
I don't know. Okay. Well, then, so how did he organize the book? He just sort of takes off on, different chapters. There are 23 of them.
From the head to the toe.
But not really. And that's what I was saying. When I am familiar from my perspective with these subject matters, we struggle with, do you do anatomy by systems, the way they work together, or do you do it by region where they're located? And then do you do gross anatomy or cellular anatomy, looking at the big structures or the little structures? And then what do you do about that physiology, about how it all works? So he has kind of, since he is not trained in these scientists, he said, hey, I'm curious. Dude, that's interesting. Boom. And off he goes on a little trail, and then he comes back in, and he does sort of start from the outside of the body, and then he goes to the inside, picks up some microbes along the way. We love our microbes. And then, like you said, head, neck, and then he gets into circulation, which is more of a systems thing. And then he goes back to skeleton. Then he goes to muscles, and then he talks about homeostasis. And then he talks about the immune system, the lungs, the digestive, sleep, reproduction, nerves, and then disease and medicine. So this is a comprehensive book, and that's why he says it's a guide for the occupants.
Yeah. So you said he didn't have an introduction, and so I went off to find, why in the world would someone dive so deep that's not a scientist and previously just wrote about his travels?
Yeah.
And so I found a quote from the Washington Post from him that said, I'd always been fascinated by the human body, and my own in particular, because it's kind of a miracle to me that after all these years of not looking after it terribly well, it still looks after me.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of my friends do the same thing.
And maybe with his popularity or his experience writing books, he had the right doors open to talk to some really amazing people on his discovery through the body. He writes about how he went into a cadaver lab with his friend, and pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, he also said that he only has one kidney. Mm-hmm. And he was talking to his docs about that, and he thought, well, that's kind of strange. Why do we have two? If I can get along with one, that's curious. And then his son became a doctor, and so they would meet at the pub, he said, and the son would be all excited about what he was learning, and the dad was saying, that's pretty interesting, too. So I think that generational conversation was kind of a gift.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like you said, the college thing, he grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and then went to Drake University for 2 years, and then decided to backpack through Europe. Took off. So I don't even know what he tried to study at Drake, but while he was in Europe, he met a young lady. They got married. They moved back to the States so he could finish his education, but I never found that he actually did that. So they went back to Europe.
And when did he hike the Appalachian Trail?
Somewhere in there.
Is that why did he drop out of college a second time to go
hiking?
Maybe.
And I actually think he did the Appalachian Trail as an older fellow.
Okay.
Because if he's using his personal experience, those were two guys after their careers were over, walking, and it was hysterical.
Oh, okay.
He got the urge to do it and move his body, which, is maybe from this exercise. That book came out earlier. So that's maybe enough about him, except for his accent. I always thought he was British. And then when I heard him talking, I thought, he speaks with a, English and American blend.
Yeah. I did Audible, the Audible version of this, and his accent made it very enjoyable because it was just different enough to catch my attention. And, he's also got wit about him. So him reading the book is just fun.
Yeah, I would think the intonation would be really interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And so that's sort of the thing. And I think his love of history is also apparent in this book. And there's some gorgeous plates in the middle of the book that you may not have seen on Audible that are, for me, he could have written this as a history of medicine because he has photographs in here of all these people he talks about historically and the things they did to people to learn what we have learned.
There is a lot of history in there. Is it this year or last year, he came out with another version that's illustrated, the body illustrated. So I don't know, it looks different online than what you have.
But this doesn't say illustrated.
No, so it's a different version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which would be fun because this book kind of reminded me of the Immune book.
Yes.
With all the fun pictures and how it broke
But this doesn't have those pictures.
No, just some history pictures in the middle.
Right.
But the new one has pictures of body parts and whatnot.
Oh, like the Immune book.
Yes.
Yeah, that book was amazing.
But the Immune book is drawings, where I think it's more realistic in Bill Bryson's illustration book.
Might have to go look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of felt he could have just written a history of medicine, and it might have been more readable for me because I kept finding little things that I wanted to discuss with him and saying, yeah, it's not quite the way I would have said that, and maybe, who knows, what's the truth? And I think for the reader like you, those details are not critical.
Right.
The gist is still relevant.
You don't need to get too nitty-gritty just to have a better understanding.
Yeah, and I think some of these very sophisticated ideas in this book, it's hard to take someone into that at a superficial level, which is all he can do. He's covering so much in this book. So my preference would be to read the Immune book. But I did think if we had started with this book, it would have been a really great first book for our podcast because all the other ones we've read, we could tie right back into this. Because I did see places where Nosedive would have been a good reference, Immune would have been a good reference, the telomere effect, why we sleep. Yeah. So, and that's the other thing is it's extensive. Like a third of this book is the notes that he has explaining why he said those things in the text. And then he's got a bibliography, and I love him because he has an index. Because if you wanted to look up one of these intriguing little curiosities, you can find it. And I think that's really helpful to readers. So Doubleday, I'm sure, helped encourage him to structure that. Mm-hmm. We're going to do some more episodes on this book, and I think we want to start talking about some content right now. But I just want our listeners to know that we're going to take a little time to share some of these curiosities with you.
Yeah, I think we'll wrap up this episode and just know that
it's coming.
It's coming. That he takes big concepts and explains them in very entertaining and relevant ways. And we'll try to share some of those with you. And just know that he makes this topic so that anyone who's curious can learn more about it in an entertaining way.
And if you like literature, you'll like this book. I'm Eleanor at 360health4u.com. And we help people make good decisions about designing a lifestyle that will support their body. Since most of us haven't taken good care of them, like he said, and somehow they take care of us anyway, that's what we want to help you do is take better care of your body.
And I am Kristen Norton with Well Balanced Nutrition. I'm one of 3 registered dietitians that can help you have healthy habits around food. Give us a visit at wellbalancednutrition.com where you can apply for a free coaching clarity call.
The opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.